This is Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. On the show, you'll hear from innovators in the food space. We'll have disruptive conversations with people from around the globe who are taking the lead on topics like food sustainability, ending world hunger, food security, and so much more. I'm your host, Paul Newnham. Great to have you on the podcast, Wawira.
We've been planning this for a long time, so excited to finally have made it here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're obviously incredibly busy with the work that you're doing, and you're CEO at the Food for Education. So for anyone who doesn't know what Food for Education is, can you just tell us a little bit about what Food for Education is?
Food for Education is a solution, African solution to ending childhood hunger. We operate in Kenya and soon to be scaling in more countries across the continent. Today, feeding about over 500,000 kids every single day, ensuring that they get nutritious, actually plant-based, vegetable locally sourced, a lot of vegetables locally sourced meals. So that's what Food for Education does across about 1,500 schools, public schools, and working and with a team of about close to 5,000 people.
So I know when we first met, you had just sort of launched into Food for Education, and you were working in Riru, and you were working with one school, I believe, at the time. And fast forward a number of years, and you're in, how many did you say?
Over 500,000, about 570,000.
Wowzers. Okay. So that's a massive organization shift. So congratulations to you and the team for really sticking at this and doing this work. It's amazing. How would you describe the way the organization's shifted over that time? Tell us a little bit about what's been going on to get from starting with one school with the vision that you kind of had to really improve school education, food education.
Food and education.
Education,
Yeah.
school meals, school food and education. Tell us a little bit about the connection and tell us a little bit about how that sort of shifted over time.
I think we met when we were pretty early in our journey. You came to our first makeshift kitchen, and sort of, a backstory of that is that we raised the money through, I was a student. So after I finished school, I grew up in Kenya. I went to university in Australia, and I went to Adelaide. Adelaide is a great city for a university town. And, I was doing my undergrad, but I was still thinking, like, what can I do back home to help people? Initially, I was, not as geography focused because I was in Australia. Obviously, the world is big. So I did some volunteering work with World Vision and other, Oak Tree, other sort of like organizations that were doing great work in Australia and across the world. But I still felt a strong connection to home, and I wanted to do something at home, and none of those organizations were doing something specifically in the town that I grew up in. So I reached out to my parents and asked them to go to the public schools because I really wanted to make an impact in education, because I truly believe education is the most transformative tool you can give anyone, coupled with food. And at that time, I had grown up with a sense of food is an issue for a lot of people, but I hadn't really honed in into how big of an issue it is. I'd sort of concentrated to what I could see around me, the people around me. But when my parents went to the public schools, it came out that the biggest barrier kids had to education was food. Surprise, surprise. And I was heartbroken by that because kids were running away from school, kids were hungry, kids were finding jobs to feed themselves, they were going to look for like waste in the markets, like wasted avocados or tomatoes or fruit so that they could like fill their tummies. And as an international student, I said I want to do something about it. I called a couple of friends together and raised, the equivalent of Australian dollars 1,600. Um, at this time, it's about 1,200 US, and sent that back home. My parents built a makeshift kitchen, and that started feeding 25 kids. At the same time, as I said, I'm an international student, so I'm putting myself through school. I'm working 3 to 4 jobs and juggling like this small organization that I've started and my real life needs of like paying rent, utilities, and school fees. So that continued for a couple of years, sort of like using the base that I was building in Australia, sending, raising money through them. It was $20, $30. One time someone gave me $1,000 and I thought, oh my God, this is insane. And that's what essentially was buying the food and sustaining, and it was 25 kids from one school. That grew to about 40 kids, 50 kids, and that's about the time that we met. I think I'd say 2015, 2016, around that time. And so the ramp up then was quite slow, right? Because I'm a student, I'm young, I'm trying to hustle as well as like feeding these kids and hustle for my own life. And my parents are like, this is a hobby, this is not a real job. Go find a real job. And when I moved back, when I started like interacting with the kids and interacting with the schools myself, not using my parents as a proxy when I was living in Australia, I realized how big a problem this is, right? Not just in the one school that we started, in the neighboring schools, a lot of requests to go to the schools. So I started obsessing over how can we build a solution for multiple schools. And that's when I found the central kitchen model that an organization in India called Akshaya Patra uses, where they build central kitchens and then distribute food. So I started obsessing over, this is a path to scale. So crowdfunded again, built the first central kitchen that was supposed to feed 1,000 kids every single day. Since then, we've expanded it, built another kitchen close to it, and in total, those two kitchens feed about 25,000 kids every single day. And that kitchen was built in 2016. Our second central kitchen was built in 2020, and since then, we're on path to have about 30, 32 central kitchens this year, and also have and feed over the 500,000 kids that more than 570,000, because we'll increase the number of kids. And that has really been a function, that scale has been a function of growing that model of the central kitchens. We now have a rural model, so that was mostly for urban areas. We also work in rural areas, that has developed over the last 2 to 3 years. And now we're looking at how we can scale across the country in more hard to reach areas, especially rural areas where the dynamics are a bit different than the urban areas.
What do your parents think about your hobby now?
I mean, they're very proud and very happy and very happy that I fought them till the death, which is here we are. So, I mean, they were obviously at the beginning, they were supportive, but I think the kind of fear that parents get when you say, now this is going to be my real thing, I think that sort of shocked them because they expected like this would be a side thing and I'd get like what quote unquote a real job. They even like were always like finding ads of jobs for me, sending them to me, talking to their friends. I have a kid who's jobless. Can you help them? And it was helpful, but I think when they started seeing the traction and they started seeing that it's moving, I remember there's a time in 2017, I think we're feeding maybe, I want to say maybe 1,000 kids or something at that point, and because we built the first central kitchen, and I got an award from the University of South Australia where I went to school, an alumni award. And so my mom and I were flown to Australia, first time for us flying business class, like huge, huge achievement, right? And the university was so generous, took care of us like amazingly. And so I get this award, and I remember getting the award, and my mom says to me, now you can go get a real job. Like you have, this is another credential to like go get a real job at somewhere else. And I was just like, what? Why would you think that I would now, like, after starting to get traction for the work that I'm doing, I would look for like another real quote unquote real job. But it took them some time to answer your question to see this as like something that I think could be a full-time thing. Yeah, and now it's a full-time thing for 5,000 people, so they're very happy.
So it's amazing. So you talked a bit about the model shifting to this central kitchen and being inspired by the program you saw in India. Tell us a little bit about what else makes the program different. So you've got a centralized kitchen rather than building kitchens in every school. Is that how it's working?
Yes, for urban areas, for rural areas, we call it semi-centralized, so the unit of centralization. Smaller than the urban areas. And a couple of things is centralized, for example, some procurement is centralized. I mean, obviously we source across the country, but and we source locally. Like if you have a kitchen in an area, we source locally some of the ingredients as well, so to empower communities. So the model, I think, has evolved into, we call it like, we're using industry practices for good. So it's very efficient, very high, emphasis on operational excellence, high emphasis on how do you sort of make sure that the child is getting the most nutritious, safe, locally sourced, all the good things in a plate. So that I think has given us like a sort of ability to scale because we're not approaching it from like a mindset of let's build so many little kitchens. We're approaching it from what is the most efficient way to deliver meals. So we actually most of the times when we go into a region, we're tweaking the model for that region. We're not primarily going for this is a copy and paste situation where we know how to do this, we're copying and pasting, and we're constantly using data to learn like, is this the most efficient way to build a kitchen? Our kitchen designs are always changing because we learn from each of them. And so I think having that mindset has been really helpful in terms of like getting better in how we deliver meals to kids.
So you talked a little bit about sourcing. What kids are getting from this is really enabling them to learn and to focus and to grow and reach their potential. How important is your sourcing in what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, sourcing is everything for us. Sourcing is our costs are about, if you look at our cost per meal, 50 to 60% of the cost is core ingredients. And so that's really defining because the rest is labor, the rest is distribution and everything else. So how you sort of source for that is very, very important. I think, one of our priorities when we're sourcing is making sure that it's local, it's from the communities across Kenya. And sometimes we have to go into the region depending on sort of like seasonality as well. So, Tanzania, Uganda, Ethiopia, depending on seasonality of ingredients, and also tweaking our menu based on seasonality. So, for example, right now, I was just in a meeting with our sourcing team, and we really want to buy sort of like we call it green grams. It's a type of lentil, the really tiny, and it's very popular with the kids. But the market that it's not season, it's not the season right now. And so it means that even if we want to literally buy it, it's not available in the market. And so then we have to tweak the menu to sort of provide more of this type of bean or this type of lentil. So we're constantly tweaking based on what's available. Also trying different things in terms of like making sure like right now we're testing, we're rolling out, we've been doing all our meals have vegetables. Our primary vegetable, a green leafy vegetable has been cabbage. And so we're testing out kale, but kale also has a challenge of scale, right? So how much kale can you actually get in the country? And so, if our kitchens are like 10,000, our central kitchens are 10,000 to 60,000 capacity, becomes very hard from a supply chain perspective. So we're constantly thinking about how do we buy, how do we store better, how do we get more in tune with seasonality, but also how do we give information to farmers? How do we give information to contractors that we're working with in terms of this is what we're buying for the rest of the year, this is what we'd be interested in testing out, and then feeding that information back so that farmers and the entire agricultural value chain can start sort of building towards because our demand is quite consistent. Schools are open most of the year in Kenya, and so about 9 out of 12 months. And so making sure that that's a really stable market for a farmer. So making sure that you're able to get things consistently has been one of the key things. So our team does an incredible job of sort of being in tune. It's sort of like you have to be really in tune with the market. But yeah, it's everything for us because we have to deliver. We deliver right now about 100 tons of food, of ingredients every single day. So you can imagine the sort of work that goes into making sure that those ingredients are available at every kitchen for preparation. Yeah.
And I mean, it's such an amazing, I mean, people don't quite realize, but when you're talking about that kind of scale, the ability for you not only to impact the child who's getting that nutritious food, but also the economy, I guess, for farmers to be growing the types of food that you're then providing that stability in supply chain. And, you're really able to stimulate. So if you move to kale, for example, you can move a whole bunch of farmers towards different crops. And so this is really able to have climate impacts, health impacts, economic impacts, and look at some of that. So it's amazing. What are some of the biggest challenges you're facing at the moment in delivering Food for Education's mission?
To your previous point, actually, I always say that, first of all, school feeding is good for kids and it's good for adults too. So it's a mixed, it's not
Yeah.
a one target part of the population benefits. Across the board, businesses, suppliers, farmers are benefiting from the work that we do, which is something that I'm very proud of and our team is very proud of as well. In terms of challenges, I think, one of the things I've said is the supply chain is constantly shifting, so always thinking about how we move with the market. We have, ability to buy at scale, but also we're not producers, and so we're constantly like trying to grow an army of producers and things like that. So that's and consolidate because consolidation is growing is one thing, but consolidation is another thing for our scale. I think another challenge is honestly, this has never changed, is the demand. Like, however more kids we feed, there's more who need feeding. It's never stopped. I hope one day it will.
Yeah.
Now it's constant in terms of can you come to my county? Can you come to this? Can you come to that? An advantage we've had over the last couple of years, we've been working more closely with government. So governments subsidize significant amounts of meals that we serve. Nairobi County, one of the biggest champions of school feeding, the governor of Nairobi and the county team are constantly, we have the largest school feeding program in a city in Nairobi, bigger than London's school
Wow.
feeding program. And that is something that I'm very proud of that government has come on board and government is contributing to the meals. Um, because at the end of the day, the responsibility lies with them. And so to see them stepping up and sort of holding their part of the deal, and parents also contribute for the meals, and philanthropy covers the rest. So that is always like a challenge in terms of making sure everyone is playing their part from philanthropy to government. Parents are the most sort of like consistent, I'd say, just because it's their own children. They're the most incentivized to keep the program going, which is something that, I'm super proud of, that we have such significant buy-in in the communities we work in, that they contribute for the meals. It's a very small amount, it's subsidized, but they do it, consistently and they do it without fail, which is something that I think is really great. And the governments as well that have stepped up from Nairobi, other three counties within Kenya now that we work with. And we're seeing it spread across the country as well, which is amazing. Yeah, so that's always a challenge, but also an opportunity.
When you interact with local and national policymakers, what's that interaction look like? So obviously they have a responsibility, as you mentioned, but also they are trying to step up in different ways. So how does that interaction work?
Yeah, I mean, there we have various kinds of partnership, but mostly the partnership that I think becomes most consistent is a co-financing partnership because food costs money, I'm saying 100 tons of food every day, that is a lot of money. The staff costs money, the logistics costs money. And so government interacting with us would be one, co-financing those meals. So in this, they're partnering with parents, and they're partnering with philanthropy through us to be able to feed kids. So the kid is the beneficiary, the government is coming in to support the parent, and the philanthropy is coming in to cover overheads and things like that. So that's one interaction. Another way that we interact with government is through policy work. So our team works with various stakeholders across the country. Like right now, we're working on a model school feeding policy for all counties in Kenya. And we're doing this through the Council of Governors, who've been very supportive in terms of like wanting to have like a baseline of institutionalizing school feeding. So institutionalizing through policy is another avenue that we interact with. So we have a policy team internally that is working with variety of counties, majority of counties in Kenya to have this implemented through policy. We also work with counties on budgeting. We work with counties to make sure that, and national government as well, to make sure that this is so institutionalizing is one of the things that we work with. And then, government also having political will, having that political, um, will is really important because budgets move towards what are political priorities. That's a reality, not just in Kenya, it's a reality across the world. And we've seen that, with, I could name like 100 million things that we've seen that with. And so working with these champions that are championing school feeding. And right now, we have the president speaking about school feeding, the governor of Nairobi speaking about school feeding, um, governors in Mombasa, in Murang'a, in Embu, in different counties um, across the country speaking about school feeding. And that's the championship that brings now attention to an issue. And the children are not unseen because this person who's a champion, who has a space in the public space, is talking about it. And one of the things we're looking at is as we grow to new countries, because that's one of our goals over the next couple of years, is how do we sort of take the model of success that we've used to institutionalize and to build momentum towards school feeding in those countries as well.
Yeah. No, I think that's so important. Over the time that you've been doing this, there's been some incredible recognition of some of the technologies, the innovation that you've used in the way that you're doing this. So you're not only scaling and reaching so many more children through the way that you're doing it, but you're also using technology in school meal programs. You mentioned data, you mentioned how you're kind of measuring and tracking. Can you explain a bit more about how technology is being used and how you're viewing technology and the work that you're doing around school meals?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was talking to someone yesterday and they asked me, like, you know, are we tech driven? Would we define ourselves as that? Or is tech just something we have to sort of say, we have tech, which I mean, each to their own, that does happen. But, it made me reflect, and this is something that our team reflects on a lot. What would we do without the data, without um, the technology that we use, tap to eat, and we would not be able to serve meals. And that's how core technology and data are to our operations. So I said earlier that parents contribute for the meals. They do this through mobile money, completely free of charge, high penetration within Kenya. And when they top up, it goes to a mobile e-wallet, and the child wears an NFC wristband, which is think of a Metro card or think of a credit card and how you tap at the grocery station or at the bus station. And that's what essentially Tap to Eat is for every child. So that technology has enabled us to track attendance, to track ability for kids to be in school, to reach out to parents to tell them, hey, we're noticing this about your child. And that is really, really helpful feedback for parents. And it also gives us the ability for parents to contribute, which I said is really critical in our model, is that ownership, is that sort of, it's not typical sort of NGO just giving this, it's partnering with you to feed your children. And that's something that's so critical. Our entire kitchens run off data from what is the temperature of food when it leaves when it leaves the kitchen, what is the temperature of food when it's being served, how much stock is coming in, how much food is being cooked, management of inventory, everything sort of running it in a very, very seamless way. Data helps us to do that, and technology does that. So I could go in about ERPs and all that Uh, but basically, as I said initially, is we're using industry for good. So we're using best practices across the world to make sure that, the same way I wouldn't say a food manufacturing company would sort of think about production and distribution of their product. We are thinking about it by bringing in the best in class technology and systems to make sure that kids get the meals that are high quality and that they deserve. Yeah.
Amazing. So, what would be your top three recommendations for governments or other nonprofits wanting to establish school meal programs? Like, what would you say, looking back on what you've been able to achieve and what you do now? What would be some recommendations that you would give?
So the first recommendation, and I see this across, is know your costs per meal or your costs. School meals are tricky because they're repetitive. It's not a thing that you go give once and then hopefully you shouldn't give it once and walk away. To see the type of impact and long life impact that we want to see from school meals, you need to do it repetitively. So you need to know how much is your cost, how much is the ingredients costing you, how much is distribution if there's any logistics, staff, and things like that. So knowing your cost is so central. And we're developing tools right now to help people who are not us know their cost of school feeding programs because we've noticed that this is such a big gap, but it's so central to how you run and sustain a school feeding program is know your cost. I think the other thing is, partnering and building partnering with local innovators and organizations. Um, and also, sometimes governments can shy away from partnering with others. They're sort of, let's all figure it out internally. But I've seen things move faster when they open the door and say, hey, we have this expertise, you have this expertise, let's sit on a table and figure it out together. And I think that means that the child benefits the most because you have all these people who are experts in different things sitting on a table and saying, how do we best deliver a meal to this kid? So that partnering. And I think the last thing I'd say is build for local context. Don't assume because it works in Nairobi, it's going to work in Embu, it's going to work in Lusaka, it's going to work in Addis, it's going to work in Kigali. It doesn't work like that. So build for local context. Africa is diverse. Africa is very different. Palates are diverse. Certain type of locations, they prefer types of different types of food. Like if what is being consumed in Lagos, what's the staple in Lagos is not the staple in Nairobi. So building for local context is really important. And we've seen this across Kenya. Our menu offering in Mombasa is not the same as in Nairobi, right? It changes and it varies based on that local context. And one thing that I think we've been really intentional on and has led to a lot of our success is because we're building for local context. You find that majority, I said we have close to 5,000 staff, are parents of the kids that we serve. So they're the ones who are advising, like, yeah, when I cook for my kid, this is how I mix. This is the recipe that I use. These are the ingredients that kids are used to. Don't bring this kind of ingredient because these kids here are not used to that kind of ingredient. Or we can introduce this and give them time to sort of adapt and get used to it. And so having that local context and having staff who are ingrained in the communities is really helpful in getting that acceptability, getting that support, but also getting people who are really bought in, because you want that buy-in not to come from you pushing an agenda, but for them saying this is important for us.
So we're coming towards the end. I just wanted to ask, where do you hope to be in 10 years? Like, what's your vision? You're obviously moving to new countries, but where do you hope you've achieved so much in such a short period? Where do you hope to be in 10 years?
10 years, wow. I think, I've never thought that far in my life. 10 years. I typically think in like a block of about 5 years, but 10 years, I think, in the next, by 2030, our goal is to feed 3 million kids across the continent. We're now at, as I said, around 570. So 3 million will be, I think, a good number. So, in 10 years, is it triple that? Is multiplied by six? I don't know what the number is, but the core of it is I really want to see school feeding programs on the continent driven by operational excellence, driven by local actors, and driven by governments as well. So, governments that buy in and serving parents in a place where they're at. So, not assuming that, this parent can do this or can't do that. For us, it's really critical to determine what the parents can actually do and meet them at the place where they're at because all parents, want to feed their kids nutritious food, unless you're a malicious person, which many people are not. You want your kid to eat very good food, but a lot of people don't have the means to do that. And so I want to see across the continent systems that are designed to meet, especially low income families where they're at. And they're designed with governments and local NGOs and local partners coming together and making sure that kids are well fed and nourished. So if we have a continent where the stunting rates are lower, the malnutrition rates are lower in 10 years, I'll sleep happy.
Well, I guess you're passionate about food as I am, and we all have lots of memories around linked to food. I still remember a standout, the lunch at Riru when we were at the school, and just remember, the love that was being put into making that meal, but also the kids all jostling and grabbing their meals, all different shapes and sizes in terms of containers full of food, but then running off and sitting down and enjoying in the sunshine. And what's a food memory that's shaped you, good, bad, or otherwise? What's something that's really shaped you and sticks with you around food?
One of the things is I went to a school where we had school meals and I did not love the school meals. So I always remember the taste, and it's seared into my memory, like the taste and things like that. And one thing that drives me right now, and every time I go to a school, I ask the kids, "Do you like the food? Do you like the food?" And they always say yes because what you've said, like it's prepared with a lot of care and a lot of intentionality and that acceptability and that sort of pride and dignity that you're not just eating food, that you're eating food that you enjoy. As a foodie makes me really happy. So that memory means that I hope we'll never repeat that and be that experience for another child in Kenya and across the continent.
Well, Wawira, thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you for chatting to us today, and thank you for being so generous in not only the work that you're doing, but also the generosity in really helping others to learn from what you guys are doing and to improve the approach for school meals across the continent. It's such critical work.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and for highlighting our work and for being a long-term supporter. I really appreciate that.
You've been listening to Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. Future Fork is produced by Disruptive Consulting Solutions and supports the SDG2 Advocacy Hub. For more info, head to the website futureforkpodcast.com. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. So you don't miss an episode of Future Fork, make sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Paul Newnham, and I'll see you in the next episode.